All right. Well, welcome back, and welcome to those of you who have just joined us to Clowder All Paws 2021. We're so glad to have you here today. And we're about to pick back up with this afternoon's programming. So our first speaker will be Luigi Marini. Who will be highlighting some updates that have occurred since the last All Pause. As a reminder, please feel free to share your questions in the chat at any point throughout the presentation. Luigi will be taking them there, as well as during the Q&A period following his talk. And with that, happy to introduce Luigi.
Hello, and welcome to the updates since the last All Pause, which was 2 years ago, summer of 2019. Today we're briefly going to discuss some of the new community activities that we have started and a bunch of new features that are available in Clowder. So first and foremost, we have moved to GitHub. We used to do most of our development on an NCSA Bitbucket instance that we maintained. And to make the project more accessible, we started this migration to GitHub, and the migration is almost complete. You can see the URL there for the GitHub organization. Almost all components, core components, well, all core components have been migrated to GitHub from the NCSA Bitbucket. There's still many repositories in the NCSA Bitbucket that have not been migrated, but they're mostly extractors and clients. So if you're curious and you want to see some of those, please follow that link below. Eventually, they will all be migrated over. We have a brand new website built on Jekyll and GitHub Pages, and the code of it is available on GitHub. That means that everybody can make PRs against it. So if you have, for example, a project you want highlighted or a blog post you want to publish, then please do make a PR against it or let us know. We can help you to do that. We can show you how to do that. Yes, we do have a blog which does need updates. The pandemic kind of slowed things down, as well as a community page on how to contribute to Clowder. Please take a look at the website and let us know what you think and how we can improve it. We have restarted webinars, which is something that we used to do a while back. We started many years ago. These are semi-regular live webinars to hear about new features and new efforts. They used to be on a monthly basis, but it was really hard to keep up with them. So now we have them every 6 months or less, more or less. And honestly, it really depends on the more people we can get to volunteer and highlight what they're doing, the more often we can have those. So please do volunteer. There is, you could show some of your, introduce some of your use cases, some technical innovations that you're working on around Clowder. Anything goes, things that you want the Clowder community to learn. And all recordings do go on YouTube. This page is currently on the NCSA wiki. You can see the link up there, and you can access slides and recordings from it. So we continue to do releases of the core. We have started having following a monthly release cadence for these releases. This can be new feature releases, so that second number. So since the first All Pause, we were at 110, now we're 117, so there have been 7 releases that have included new features. But there have been many more that include bug fixes, and that's the third number you see there. If you want to know more about the details of these, take a look at the changelog release tab on GitHub for a full list of changes. We'll highlight today in this session, we'll highlight some of the new features. So over the past 2 years, we've tried really hard to build an active community on Slack. So you can join via the main website and say hi in general, in the general Slack channel. You know, there's a bunch of channels that we maintain: developers, extractors, deployments. There's some private channels, and this has gone pretty well. We actually have had some really interesting discussions, not just technical conversations, but also discussions about new features, use cases, suggestions, lots of questions. It's kind of our easiest way to answer questions when people are confused about functionality or they get stuck building something. And it has also, in a few cases, you know, helped us get in touch with new potential users who came on Slack and said hi, which was great. So please, if you're not on Slack, please come and join Slack. Again, it's not just for technical conversation, you know. So it's really right now probably the easiest way for us to feel like, you know, there's a community around Clowder. So we have also started official Slack office hours. Every Thursday, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time on Slack, we make sure that at least one developer is available to answer questions. You know, a lot of us work on many different projects, so sometimes it's hard to answer Slack whenever a question gets asked. We also have people in different time zones. And so we established these office hours to make sure that you know, there's always somebody available. You know, these conversations are usually, you know, in Slack text, but if need be, you know, we can have video sharing and then screen sharing and so on. So a big welcome and thank you to all the new contributors. You know, your contributions mean a lot to us. We really are trying, as part of this effort, you know, this NSF, CSSI effort, to broaden the community, and so it's really, really important. And we really do appreciate all the contributions. We'll show some of them today, maybe not all of them, but you know, thank you so much. And if you like to get involved but you don't know how, again, please come on Slack, you know, or on day 3 we'll have a session on how to contribute, so you can join that one as well and learn about, you know, the details, what it takes. So thank you once again. So let's talk about some new features that we have developed over the past 2 years. Again, this is a subset, you know, a small selection. We'll start with some work that we did with the Research Data Alliance around Bagit Interoperability. We used to have Bagit support. When you download a data set, you'll get a bunch of metadata included within the data set with this Bagit, following this Bagit specification, which is a specification created by libraries and used by libraries in all different cases. So what we've done is there has been some work by RDA to improve those specifications, and we have added this extra information and support for data site version 4 XML format, expanded metadata transfer support. So we've done a bunch of enhancements that hopefully make our Bagit, you know, zip data set more compatible with other systems. Also, yeah, so what that means is that you should be able to upload a Clowder data set to other instances, other systems such as Dataverse, Data1, and those should be able to extract not just the files, but also the rich metadata that has been embedded. The other thing that came out of this work, which is really exciting, is that there is an API web point that allows you to upload a data set, including folders and metadata, and it creates that data sets in Clowder for you. So you don't have to manually create folders, upload files, you can just upload that zip file and then it creates the data sets for you, which is incredibly exciting. And I should say this is also something that we plan on hopefully leverage for the federation work that we'll be doing. That is, connecting multiple instances of Clowder to each other. Another really cool feature has been the addition of a user interface for runtime parameters submission. So when you submit a file or data set to an information extractor, a Clowder information extractor, usually you can't provide parameters. It was actually the case that all along you could, if you're submitting through the web API, you could provide a JSON, an arbitrary JSON document that would be kind of included with the data set and file, and the extractor could do something with it. But this was only available through the web API, and it wasn't very well documented. So we've added the ability of specifying these parameters and creating UI widgets in the UI automatically based on this JSON definition. This uses an open source library called JSON Form. Please go take a look at it. It's incredibly flexible, and so what it let us do is you can add some JSON to the extractor manifest you see here on the right, and specify what kind of parameters you're going to have, and how you want to show them, so what kind of widgets you want to use. And you can see an example on the left in the case of these two archival extractors. And so you can select those, and then when you click submit, they get submitted over. And behind the scenes, again, there's still a JSON document that extractor needs to do something with. But now users actually can do this from the UI, which is again incredibly exciting because it really opens up a lot of opportunities when creating these information extractors. So PyClowder, as most of you probably know, as we have mentioned already, is the easiest way to develop information extractors. And we keep doing a lot of work on it, and we've had several releases since the last time we saw each other. Some of the highlights are we now have full Python 3 support. The Docker images install PyClowder using pip versus having an image that includes PyClowder. This was creating a bit of difficulty when wanting to use different versions of libraries or conflicting libraries. So this just makes it easier to create an extractor, to containerize an extractor, I should say. We have also added some new functionality to our simple extractors. A simple Python extractor, which just makes it easier to create an extractor in Python. You can learn more about them during the extractor session on day 2 tomorrow. So we have added support for datasets. So simple extractors, you can easily write code that also creates datasets, could create datasets as outputs. It could add files, tags to files and datasets, and output additional files. So again, these are things that with the core PyClowder extractor you can already do, but it requires a little bit more development. And now with this, it's a little bit easier to add this information. So another feature that was kind of there behind the scenes in the API, but it was not very visible and not well documented because it's somewhat experimental, is this idea of being able to create relations between existing data sets. This is something that we were doing already by using the regular metadata, but it could easily get lost, and it wasn't specialized, so there was no standard way to do this. Well, so we have these API endpoints where you can post, you can see at the bottom, and get and retrieve relations. And these relations can actually be between data sets, files, URLs. In this case, we just show on the right the payload of the post that basically says create a link between a source and a target, and both of them are data sets. It also doesn't show that you can have an RDF RDF type attached to the relations, which simply means that you can have a typed relation. So that was already available. What we did add was we are starting to show this in the UI. So again, you can't add the relations from the UI, you have to do it from the API, but you can see them. And so for example, in this case, we're looking at a specific data set. If there's a relations, there's this related tab. And in here, there's two target data sets, JS and Bagit. And because we didn't specify the relation type, then it's a generic relation. So again, in the past, we've used this for example, when we had extractors that created data sets as outputs. And so we would say, well, this input data set is related to this output data set. But it could be used in a lot of different ways. For example, you could build a simple recommender system using this functionality to store and present related data. Yeah, please let us know if you're interested in helping developing this feature. We think there's a lot of potential for it. We have better extractor management within Clowder and also outside of Clowder, but within Clowder we have improvements to the extractor page where you go and see all the extractors that are registered with that instance, that are available to that instance. So now there is things like submission metrics, logs, job history, extractor maturity. Extractor can be grouped using labels that the users of the system can define. Users can filter these extractor lists using label, space, trigger metadata keys. So, you know, as this list of extractors become very, very large, then this helps you filter down and find what you need. We also added a more refined options for users to set extractor triggers. So when extractor automatically run on data as it comes in, you can do it at the global level and you can do it at the level of a space. And the problem was that at the level of the space, it was very hard. You couldn't turn off an extractor that was defined at the global level. So now you can do that. You can see that in the bottom right in the last column, disable in space. But it's also a little bit clear, hopefully, you know, turning it on and off and knowing whether, you know, the super admin has enabled it or not. We have a new mobile Clowder app written in Flutter that has been published to both Apple and Android Apple stores. The source is available there. You can use it to connect to any existing Clowder instance, browse resources with it, upload new files, for example, from your camera. And again, this is a place where we could do a lot in here. The code is open source. And we know that we have a lot of use cases where it would be nice to have some, you know, ability from your phone in the field, or, you know, where you're about, you know, taking pictures or of samples or anything, or even other uses of the camera or other sensors on a phone, and then automatically upload them to a Clowder instance. So we also now have the capability to stream user events in real time. So this means that whenever a user logs in, signs up, views a file, a dataset collection, right away there's a message that goes out on a specialized RavenQQ. And by default, it gets stored to an InfluxDB database. And you can create dashboards using Grafana so that you can you know, have a really good live monitoring and also historical log of user activity. And this is something that Syngenta Simple Project has developed and is using to great success. So we hope that other instances will try it out and see how well it works for them. So we talked about extractors, kind of listings and catalogs within Clowder. We also had something that we had developed for the Brown Dog project that was an external kind of central catalog for extractors. We have deployed an instance at this URL for Clowder, for the Clowder community, and we have been doing some improvements on it, and we're almost there. It's not quite ready for you know, public use, but basically what it lets you do is to have a really nice registry of all the extractors that are being developed or out there. So what that means is that you don't really upload the extractor here, you just upload the definition. The definition includes where you can get the source code as well as where you can get the Docker image if that's available. But that way, you know, anybody can manage their extractors however they want, and now we have a central place where we can actually catalog. That's one of the questions that comes up very often is, you know, what are all the extractors that Clowder provides? And, you know, we always struggle to answer this question because we don't really have a master list. So we really hope that, you know, once ready, everybody starts using this anytime they create an extractor. So we have this really, really nice list. We also hope to maybe extend this to previewers, which is another place where you know, they could be developed and published anywhere. So we have the ability of archiving files now, and this again was used by Syngenta Simple to change the AWS S3 bit, which basically lowers the cost and makes the file, you know, harder to get, or slower to get, I should say. But the way we develop this is very generic, so you can actually deploy develop extractors that could put the file, for example, somewhere else. For example, moving it from a spinning disk to a tape drive. And there's the ability of archiving and archiving in the UI. And then behind the scenes, this extractor kind of does all the magic. And then if it's archived, you can see the status as archive. And the project is also working on the ability of archiving and archiving full data sets. There is also some logic that lets you set inactivity thresholds and delay when they get auto-archived. So you can say, if nobody's looking at a file or data set for a long time, go ahead and archive it. And then when I need it, I could unarchive it. There's a bunch of Web API improvements. We're slowly improving the Web API. We know that a lot of users have been very patient in using it, and there's a lot of improvements that are needed. So for example, you know, we have now return thumbnails as part of the file information. There is endpoint for batch operations on files instead of having to send a request for each file. The search endpoint now returns JSON objects describing each result rather than just the ID, and then you have to make a bunch of other calls. So we'll continue to do those, you know, moving forward as requests come in. We have new previewers from the community. A lot of those contributions are new previewers. So if you're interested in learning more about those, please join the data previewer session later today. They're really exciting. And again, the highlight, you know, all the kind of different things one can do with previewers. And so we really hope that users will, developers will start developing more previewers. And we also have the ability now in the UI to mark files in a data set and do batch operations on them. Things like tag, delete, download, and submit for extraction. Finally, we have some HTML formatting support on the home page. So we know that the front page is a place where users want to put a lot of information about their instance. And so now you can have HTML, you can have images, tables embedded in here. So you can make your home page a little bit more relevant to your instance. So please try it out and let us know how it works for you. So that's it. If you want to join, if you can, join the plans for next year's session on day 3 to learn more about plans for the near future. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Luigi, for that presentation. I noticed that we're caught up on questions in the chat right now. While folks think about any additional questions that you might want to share, and I encourage you to do so, I wonder if we could actually read back a couple of the questions that were answered in chat for the benefit of those who might be watching this video later. So For example, Barbara Minsker had asked, how easy is it to install extractors from this archive into a different Clowder instance? Can we share data or extractors across instances yet or soon? Luigi, do you just want to recap your answer there?
Yes. All the extractors that we developed are Dockerized. They're made into containers. And we publish those for the ones that are open source. We publish them to Docker Hub and other Docker image catalogs. We have one at NCSA. And so what that means is that if you're running Docker, what you can do is do a Docker pull. And then we have instructions on how you can run that container local with Clowder. So it communicates with Clowder. And that's it. After that, the container basically registers itself with the Clowder instance, and then you're ready to go. And tomorrow, Rob Cooper will have a session on deployment where he will talk a little bit more about this stuff in detail. And we are trying to make that process as simple as possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question you answered earlier that we could just summarize briefly here. A basic question. This is from Deep Chatterjee. Is an extractor the way one would do any generic post-processing to a data set? Say if my data sets are certain parameter estimation results and I want histograms plotted out for all my parameters.
Right. So yes, the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is, which is sometimes this is a little bit confusing. So extractors are a way for us to wrap existing code and run it next to the data within Clowder. In practice, what that means is that when you create an extractor, you really have two ways to launch the extractor on some existing data and file. One is the manual way, which means that you go to a data set, a file, you select the extractors, you might have parameters, as we've talked about, that you set, you submit it, and then that's a manual submission that you do whenever you want to run some post-processing code on some data. Almost all extractors you can register to fire automatically based on some kind of event. And that's where maybe the confusion comes in, because when we usually talk about extractors, the idea of I have data come in and then the extractor runs automatically on it. But really, both functionality are available to most extractors.
Very good. Lisa, could you read out the new question that's come in?
Yeah. From Donnie Winston. Regarding sharing data sets, is there a concept of mirroring a known data set file across instances, or must everything be copied and an identity equality embedded in a custom metadata field?
We have been looking at the concept of federation across instances. So great question. We'll touch briefly upon this on next year kind of developments on day 3. But just kind of in a nutshell, we're looking at ways to basically sync the metadata about the data sets across instances that have a trust relationship. And that way, when you search for something, you're looking for something, you might get a result that doesn't reside local, but it resides on this trusted network of Clowder instances. And then you would go to that Clowder instance, you would have to kind of provide your credentials again to have access to the actual bytes of the data. This is very preliminary, it doesn't have to work this way, but we have that that we're looking at, that way of doing it that we're looking at. The other thing is we mentioned the RDA, The other thing that we mentioned is the work that Max Burnett did for RDA with a few others from the University of North Carolina, where when you download now the zip file for a data set, it already included Bagit information. It includes even more Bagit information, and then you can actually, now there's an endpoint, it's not available in UI, where you can upload that to Clowder, and it takes care of all the metadata, the folders, and it creates the data set. So that gives you also a way to move things right now across instances, but yes, it would duplicate the data, it will create new IDs. So there, you lose kind of the link between the two, kind of the identity.